Hello and welcome to Mutant Donkey Patreon, YouTube channel, and whatever else you want it to be. Today we're gonna do a tutorial on how to paint a purple worm. And this friend was kind enough to give me a purple worm in 3 pieces. So in return I will do a video tutorial for his kids and we will have a purple worm. The first phase is going to be to clean it. I have already washed it. Whenever you have a piece, you should always wash it first with lukewarm water, maybe just a tad of soap, not too much. And then let it dry, or just dry it, make sure there's no water left in it. Then grab a brush. This is a brush that comes standard with the Games Workshop miniatures. Or you can just use a toothbrush. And the reason being is if you look close, you may be able to see maybe some debris in places. I don't know. So let's start cleaning this. I may fast forward this if it takes too long, but I don't think so. You just want to make sure that this is clean. The cleaner the surface, the better the paint will adhere to it. So that's what I'm doing. Though there may be some pieces that don't come out. This is a 3D printed piece, so it's not going to have the seams that a cast piece, has. That's the advantage with the 3D printed pieces. Now you do lose a little bit of quality with 3D printed pieces, but this is a resin, I think, and the resin printers, they do a little bit better quality. So I'm just brushing it. I just want to make sure any dust, debris, anything is off of it. Just looking at it, I don't think there's a lot that I can take out of here. Now, if you ever find seams, some things that you want to get rid of on a typical figurine, you can always use this. This is just a flat piece. It's not sharp. Not sharp at all. And it can get rid of rough edges. Normally in a figurine, if you have rough edges, you would go like this. I am not sure. Well, it does work a little bit. You can see a little bit of debris on there. So if you see a little bit of debris that you want to take off, you can just edge it out with this tool. Some people like to use the back of an xacto knife, but that's not so good for kids. Kids and xacto knives don't mix, so find one of these. I found this one at Games Workshop, but I'm pretty sure you can find one at a hobby store where they do miniatures. You can use it to like clean up little details and things that you don't want, like little bumps. So now I have the thing in 3 pieces. I'm gonna finish brushing this really quick. But you have the piece in 3. And now, in order to glue it, we're gonna use a plastic glue. This plastic glue, well, most of my materials right now are from the Games Workshop, so I'm not affiliated with them, but it seems to work. So what plastic glue does, does not simply glue, it actually melts the plastic on both ends a little bit. I honestly don't know how this works with a resin piece, but anything that's plastic will kind of melt and make a slightly better, or a better adhesion, basically. You see, it kind of just fits in there. So we'll put some right here. Making sure I got this right, and a little bit goes a long way. You don't have to put a lot. You see, I'm just putting some on the sides. Just a little bit. Don't overdo it with this stuff. Otherwise it will take longer to glue, in my experience. The more you put, the longer it takes to glue. I just put a little bit. Like I said, a little bit goes a long way, especially when you have such a deep recess here. Oh, did I do the wrong one? No, I did the right one. There we go. Okay, so it goes in there. Sometimes you'll get little strands. Just make sure there's no strands hanging out. Just leave it there. It's pretty much ready to go. That's a really deep set right there. So you don't run the risk of it not gluing. Especially this piece stays together even without you gluing it. But I recommend that you glue it, because when you're going to be playing with it, it is going to fall into pieces. And this glue is a little bit old, and that's why it's taking me a little bit of time to get the glue out, but normally it's quicker. I actually haven't painted stuff in months. But as part of the Mutant Donkey Patreon, whatever you call that, we're coming back to basics and we're gonna paint. Now, there you go. So we secure it right there. Twist it a little bit. Make sure that you got it where you want it. There you go. Now sometimes you'll be left with gaps that you don't like. Like for example, I don't know if you can see there's a little gap at the bottom of this thing, right there. And sometimes if the gap is big enough and it bugs you enough, you can always use this stuff, this is called green stuff. And they sell it both in this kind of plastilina, what do you call that, like Play-Doh form, or they sell it in a little thing that you can paint it in. And what it is, it's just a plastic that when mixed creates kind of like the same material that is in the plastic figurines, and then you just kind of squeeze it and play with it until it becomes one. Just mix it until it becomes one single color, and then you can apply it in holes that you want to cap. And this stuff will dry, and then you can actually sand it. You can sand it and smooth it out. So if you ever get a figurine that has a huge gap or something that you don't like, you can also use a little bit of this and put it here. Like for example, we would do something like this. So there is that. Now let's talk about priming the figure. The figure is now clean, it's been glued, and the gaps have been filled. The gaps are not sanded yet, but they're filled. See how the gaps are kind of rough? So that'll need to be sanded. Lightly sanded, I would say. So I use the surface primer from Vallejo. Vallejo paints you're gonna find are some of the best paints you can get for the quality and the price for painting figurines. And I also use Citadel shades and colors, which are a lot more expensive than other paints, but the variety of colors and shades and layers, it's hard to, I don't know, they have some really nice pigments already pre-mixed, good range of colors. So I use a combination of maybe Vallejo and Citadel colors. Let me bring my other paints. This a quick introductory paints to get are the War Games paints. And this is a basic set. I don't know if it was like 20 something bucks maybe. It's not very expensive, so it's a good set to have because you can mix basic paints. Basically mix just get a set of basic paints, and I think it does come with a shade. It comes with a, let me see, it's got brown, it's got a matte black color. What else do we have? It's got some metal. It's got a plate metal. It's got white, blue, red. Let me move this over to the side. But it also has a wash. A wash is what Citadel calls a shade. Basically, they're very thinned out paints that go into the crevices of your figures to give them depth, basically. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. So for sanding, I use some of these. You can get them at hobby stores. They're files. And I don't know where I got these. Maybe Michael's. I don't. And so some of them are rounded. I like the rounded ones, especially for applications like this where you can get like an even, sanding surface there. So okay, here we go. So now I'm gonna take a basic brush, and your base coat, not the base coat, but the primer coat is the first coat you're always gonna apply, and you're not gonna need you need like a cheap brush does the work for the primer. Just make sure you always get things wet before you do anything. You just leave it there. Let me clean the surface a little bit. We're just gonna put some here. Now I normally like priming with the brush rather than with a spray. Some people like priming with a spray. In my experience, I have not had a lot of luck with sprays from any brand that I've tried. Or maybe I'm just not that good at applying paint with a spray because it always tends to take the detail out of the miniature. Sometimes the spray gets clogged and it grabs too much pigment, and if you spray in one area too long, it can obliterate in detail, basically. With the, I know priming like this takes longer, but to me you have more control over the evenness of the coating. But the one thing you gotta make sure is that the surface is clean and clear when you start priming. Otherwise, any debris that you have may cause the primer to flake later on. And if the primer flakes, then everything that's on top of the primer is gonna flake away with it. Well, I'm finishing priming this thing. Let's go over the steps. So we got gluing, well, cleaning, gluing, priming. Of course, the intermediate step is green stuff if you need to add green stuff to fill gaps. So cleaning, gluing, green stuff, sanding, then priming. After you prime, you let it dry. So I normally leave it dry overnight. I'll pick it up tomorrow. And then we do base coating. So for this video, I'm not going to use any of these paints. These are Citadel paints and they come in all specific colors and things. So we're not going to use that. The reason being is that if you can't afford those paints, you shouldn't be forced to afford like the more expensive paints. So this worm we're gonna do without any of the expensive paints. So we're gonna mix. So what are we gonna do? We're gonna start with a main purple, which is probably a deep purple. So let's just start mixing colors. I'm gonna move the thing out of the way for now. Let's put him over here. And actually let's put him back here. Put him behind the scene. So I'm just gonna put a little bit of blue. Let me see if this, yeah, always shake paints. And this blue is an ultramarine blue. This already has a little bit, it's a little bit towards the purple side, that blue. So putting a little bit of blue there. And these things have undulations. A lot of people like to mix paints on something flat. You can do that as well. Probably flat is better. Then what I do is I just, this is not mixed well. Hold on. So I'm going to dry this up. It's like the liquid is a vehicle to carry the pigment, and that's all we got. We didn't get any pigment, so we just got rid of that and put some paint here. So there we go. And then you just mix. I'm gonna get this wet a little bit just to tighten the bristles up a bit. Okay, and then I dry. I normally dry. And you can control the moisture content of your paint by just adding water here and there. So basically I have one color here, and then they meet in the middle. So that way you can drag one color into another color to make the third color purple. So there you go. So I want a more bluish purple because it's a more quiet color, the purple that I want. So I put a little bit more blue than red in it. Okay. And there you go. You have somewhat of a purple color here. Now even this purple color I can apply with this brush because, you know, the figure is substantial, so it's big. And so I'm just gonna start applying color on the figure right here. And the color may be a little bit too light, but we can darken it up, that's fine. So we can darken that color just a little bit if we want to. And to darken anything you use black, so you can put just a dab of black right there. And then, but be careful because black and white are normally very strong when compared to a regular color. A little bit goes a long way. Like a little bit of black turns this really dark. So remix. Okay, and now you have like a darker purple. And we can apply here, and you can see that's a darker purple right there. You can just mix it with a lighter purple. So right now we're just doing the base, and don't worry if you make mistakes, because this thing is about making mistakes. There's nobody that, I haven't met anybody that doesn't make mistakes. So if you don't like the color, you just remix it and you reapply it. So art is a discovery experience. It's not a preconceived idea of anything. So it's not that I don't like the lighter purple, it's that the lighter purple will go on the figure later. I want to go from dark to light. I don't want to put light first. I want to put like a darker undercoat, you know. I want to put a darker undercoat first, and then afterwards you can do lighter. And the reason I'm not using the base brush that I have is because this brush is bigger, and the figure is fairly big in size, so I'm not worried too much. Actually, in this case, a bigger brush is better. So And the reason why I do like base coating, doing the primer in black, is if you miss spaces, it's just going to be black. So it's just going to be in shadow. So it's not as, it's a little bit more forgiving when you paint than having a white. Because if you have white as a primer, then if you don't paint correctly, the white is going to show every single time. I'm just going to dab it in there just to get a little bit of moisture. Just a little bit of moisture. So you can thin out the paint a little bit, it'll go a longer way. It'll create a thinner coat, but that's fine. And there you go. There's no science to this, you just kind of paint and put the color where you think you want it. This is just you just paint it where you feel you want the color to be. Especially with a base coat, this is the safe part of the painting. Because here we're just getting started. Mistakes are no problem. I'm gonna add a little bit more paint over here. I already got paint on my fingers. So I'm gonna add a little bit more blue. Then I'm gonna add a little bit of red. I'm gonna shake it again. There we go. Now I'm gonna dip this in the water a little bit. We wanna get some moisture in that paint. When you put moisture in the paint, it applies easier. If your paint is too pure, then it's gonna go in too thick and it may not layer correctly. There you go. So now we have that nice purple color that we want. Let me make sure that the worm is being focused on correctly. There we go. So you see we're getting a nice base color. So I'm just focusing on separating this like the hard shell pieces from the softer skin. There's a difference in texture between the hardness of the scales and the softness of what's underneath. So that's what I'm concentrating this purple color right now. So you can tell that the material of the scales is different than the material right here. So I'm not going to just go and paint this area the same color because I want to make it more fleshy. Okay. If you want to dry your brush a little bit, just dab it on the napkin, get rid of excessive moisture. Also, like there's moisture pooling down here. You can grab a napkin. You can always dab a little napkin and hit it here. It'll absorb any excess of moisture. You don't have to apply the napkin hard, just make contact. The water will automatically travel. It'll use capillary action and get on the paper towel. And now let's dry. There, I had watered the paint down too much for this part, so I had to repaint this. And there you go. That's the base. We'll let the base dry. While the base dries, since this is a whole animal, which is connected, all the pieces of this animal are connected to each other. That means that the colors are not necessarily going to change that drastically from one part of the model to another. There's going to be changes, but it's not like a person wearing armor or clothes where one piece is very bright and red and maybe the other one's green. This is all kind of shades of nature, natural, maybe purple. But I do want to make the differentiation between the scales and the actual skin, the fleshy parts. Okay. So we'll let that dry. We'll put a little bit of water on here. Dry this out a little bit. Now, since we're dealing with just a limited palette, I'm going to add flesh. Okay? And you say, well, the flesh does not look like this flesh. Well, it doesn't. But we need to transform this flesh into the flesh of a beast that has purple in it. So let's see how we can do it. Well, let's put this flesh over here. And let's take some of this purple and let's put it inside this flesh. How's that? Let's take some of this purple and this blue and this red and let's mix it around with this flesh right here. So what happens when you do that? Come up with a lighter kind of color. So we need to lighten this up just a bit. We need to apply a little bit more flesh in here, because the flesh color, that yellowish kind of pale color, needs to control a little bit. So every color has a piece of every other color, and that helps. This is still too dark. We need to lighten that up a little bit. So I'm gonna get rid of the excess paint here. So I'm gonna put a dab of this flesh, and on top of that I'm gonna put a dab of white. Okay? Nothing lightens up something like white. White and black are very powerful, so you have to use them sparingly. There you go. Just a little drop of white goes a long way. So you mix the white with the flesh and you get a paler kind of color, but that pale color is also mixed with the purple. Okay, you don't want just the pale color, you want it to resonate with the purple. So like I said, every color has a piece of something else. So there you go. So now it's a nice and charged brush with that pale color, and let's start paling this thing up. So now we have this. Now we need to make another level of transition. It's all about minute transitions. Okay, and it starts giving it kind of like a fleshy look now. Okay, so the next level of transition is going to be, and let's add a little bit more. Let's add a little bit lighter. Okay, add a little bit more flesh. Add a little bit more white. And add a little bit more yellow. You fly by the seat of your pants, okay? You figure out what it's gonna be. Figure out what you like, okay? Mix it, look at it. If you don't like it, get rid of it. If you like it, keep it. Okay? You can paint a little piece of the miniature. If you don't like how it's going, stop, paint over that, you know, begin again. It's what you want to do in the moment that matters. That matters more, okay? Like I still want a little bit of purple in here. Okay, but now it's lighter, it's more yellow, it's got a little bit more vibrance, okay? We're just using basic colors here from a cheap set to just create little by little the layers that we want. So, okay, this has a little bit more yellow in it, it's a little bit lighter. And we can continue. Okay, if you want to get rid of a little bit of moisture, you just dab it on the napkin. So it's kind of like you're just, okay. You see how it's layering? It's layering little by little. I can layer it up here as well, just a little bit. Okay. It's just like highlighting. So I'll put some of these in here. And keep in mind, most of this paint's still wet. Like a lot of this stuff hasn't even dried yet. It's in the process of drying, but you're using some of it too. If it dries completely, then there's more of a separation. So what I do is I also wet the brush so that the paint doesn't go on too harshly. The problem is if the paint goes on too harshly, the paint is going to look disjointed from the layers underneath. You need to make sure that it does not look disjointed, that it transitions, that it looks like something that is part of the whole thing. Okay? There you go. Put a little bit more moisture on that. And then we're going to go underneath. You may not see what I'm doing, but I'll show it to you afterwards. It's just this, with that figure that twists as much, it's just kind of hard to show everything at the same time. Okay, so there you go. So you see we're going from purple into like kind of lighter purple and then a lighter kind of yellowish. Okay. And then we can go even farther. Let's call this the fourth step, in which we do a little bit more yellow and a little bit more flesh. And maybe we don't put white this time. I'm just gonna get the excess paint out of this brush, use it just to mix. Okay, so now you can even add a little bit more yellow. Actually, let's add more flesh. I like the flesh. Okay, there we go. And the flesh is a pink color that you can create using, you know, a yellow, red and white. If you use yellow, red and white in different proportions, you can get this flesh color. It's not a big deal. You don't have to use a prepackaged, you know. Every color that exists in this world can be created from very basic things. So don't worry about it if you don't have that particular one. So now this fleshy color is just going to be on the flesh. It's not going to be on the bones. So it's not a... The fangs that stick out are not fleshy. So those are going to be more white later. But we just put more fleshy stuff at the bottom because we need fleshy. We need this creature to be more fleshy. Just gonna make sure there's no excess moisture on this brush. Charge dye tip and go for it. More flesh. You can add a little bit of flesh at the edges here. It's all just subtle changes. Okay, so you see how it's coming? There you go, so now you have more fleshy tones. And you have variants now, right? So then I realize I need to well, the reason I didn't paint the bottom of it is because I didn't want to do it with a bigger brush. But now we can go back and hit it with this original colors, which still haven't dried, which is good. So I can just paint the bottom of this. Okay, clean this a little bit, add a little bit of the fleshy color to it. And I still have variations of all these colors in here. That hasn't gone away, so I can just use them and apply them still wet to each other. Like these colors have not gone away, they're still here in my palette, so. So I have every variation of the color that I want on this palette. So if I want to go and flesh this out, you know, I can flesh it out. I don't know if you can see the bottom of the mouth there. It's kind of hard. The angle is tough. And then I'm going to grab a little bit of that fleshy color and add it down there. So now it has been layered just like the rest of the... Okay, so if you look at it from the side, you see that the bottom, that piece is also layered. So now let's add a little bit of white. And a little bit of flesh. So me clean this. I'm gonna clean this on the dirty water over there. Clean it on my napkin and mix these together. And now we have a lighter flesh color. Okay, this is a very vulnerable color. It's a very light fleshy color. It's what denotes the weak parts of the worm. It's what adventurers should be hitting, probably. The very fleshy bottom of this thing. So I'm going to dip this in a little bit of water just to so it's more fleshy. So you see that part is really vulnerable, you can tell, because it's very but good luck getting there, you know. If you're an adventurer, good luck getting to that place. But that's what you're aiming for. You're aiming for the flesh. Okay. You're aiming for that flesh. Now, I'm gonna clean this brush just a bit. And we're gonna do the front fangs over here. Actually, the fangs can be that fleshy color. Well, they're gonna be like a mixture. Let me see what we're gonna do with that color. We're probably gonna use this, something like this, to paint the fangs. I'm gonna need a little bit more water on here. It's gonna be fleshy. But it's more of a yellowish bone color, what I came up with over here. That's a yellowish bone color. Just paint those, get a little bit of paint here and there. I'm going in deep with the fangs back there. It's not the easiest thing to paint because there's not a lot of room to apply the paint, but we're just gonna go for it. Okay. This is just our first stab at it. We just want to get some color on those fangs. For example, at this point I'm deciding that I want some purple on those fangs, on the top fangs, because maybe they form part of his attack structure. Like I want that color maybe to match a little bit that color, and that's okay. You just do it. It's your figurine. You decide how you paint it and what colors belong at any given point in this thing. So if that's what you want, do it. So I'm just gonna darken this a little bit with a little bit of purple. And I may decide that later I want a more purple highlight. Maybe the ones on the outside are more purple and the ones on the inside are more white. Because as you paint the figure will tell you kind of what it wants, what it wants to be. Okay, so now I'm seeing that the decision to make this a darker purple is probably a good one. It looks better as purple than just yellowish. Now the rest of the paint is beginning to dry, so it's starting to acquire a different quality. You'll notice that the quality of the piece changes as the paint dries. Okay, so we have that. Now, okay, so I have those, which is a lighter kind of purple. But now we can even do something more interesting. Let's add some blue and some white. Let's add some blue and some white to this. Oh, what? Before we do that, hold on. I think I have a place where I didn't color. I didn't paint the... Down here I was missing a little bit of that purple background. Just want to make sure I'm not missing places. Okay. So what my intuition is telling me is that I want a more vibrant purple for the mouth. It's a little bit too dull right now, so we're gonna do more vibrant purple. So at this point, that's looking okay. Okay, and just to state, I'm not a professional. I'm not never claim to be a professional. I don't think that I could get paid for this particular job of painting. This is just to show how I do things, and maybe some people can learn some things. And at the same time, I watch other people do things and I learn things. But in the end, it's whatever you want to do. And the more you like it and the more you do it, the better you get at it. So, solid fourth, man. I mean, I know this is part of my Patreon. Obviously, if you like it, you'll give me money and that turns me into a professional, but I don't claim to be one of the best out there. This is just something I like to do. And for people that just happen to know a little bit less than me, it could be helpful. Now, for some others, it may not be, and that's fine. I mean, it is what it is, man. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'm really gonna try to clean this brush a little bit better because I don't want anything to... Oh, this brush is near its end. Hey, look, we got our tip back on this brush. Not bad for an old brush. Okay, so now we grab some red, some white, and some blue. And that makes a lighter color of, a lighter shade of purple. Okay. There we go, how's that? So let's get this wet here, and let's get a little bit on the tip. And let's do a little bit of highlight here. Normally the lighter color goes on the most raised areas, so just focus on the raised areas. Don't get any, the lighter colors normally should not go in the crevices. There are exceptions to the rule, but in general, the lighter colors highlight, therefore what you're painting is a reflection of something. There we go. So we're working with the teeth to get them a little bit highlight. You see how I highlight the tips, and the rest of it starts speaking for itself. It's going from darker to lighter. And there you go. We put some on the inner mouth there. So that's going to be a lighter color. So now with the other part, you can even like highlight a little bit of the, let's just get a little bit of water in there. I just don't want to overpower it. But you can, on some of the bumps, you can put a lighter. Technically what we're doing right now is layering. What we've been doing for a little bit is layering. We're just getting this stuff on the higher portions. So it's a little bit of edging here. Okay. And so we just come up and we kind of blend it and at the same time highlight it. Like that's why I get some water on the brush, so that it's more of a blend rather than a than just pure paint on it. Sometimes when you get pure paint on the highlight, it comes out too harsh and you don't get a smooth transition. What makes the piece come alive is smooth transition. So we can go about the ridge and say that the ridge is gonna be like the place where most of the light's gonna bounce off of it. So you can go from the ridge and just literally paint. Imagine that it had a backbone. I know worms are not supposed to have backbones, but imagine if this was the backbone here. And then you just come down with the highlight color, and I'm gonna add a little bit of water because I don't want that's gonna be too harsh. So I'm gonna, there you go. I'm just gonna dilute a little bit, and this is just going over the top parts of it. The edge of it is also important, that edge right there. Places where things turn corners when they change materials, that's a good place to do highlights. or a contrast. You know, those are good places to get some contrast. So that should work there. Right, I'm gonna wet my brush and just kind of scatter some of this already stuff that I put. Reason being is I want to blend it a little bit more. I don't want it to stay there too harsh. If it stays there too harsh, it's gonna look like paint on top of paint instead of looking like a monster. But if I use a little bit of water and I move it around, it looks more organic, let's say. There we go. Okay. Now, I mean, you could say that's a worm. At this point, some people could say, well, you're done with a worm. And I'm like, not really, not by a long shot. I mean, this could be where some people finish painting the worm, but this is not where I finish painting the worm. We got a lot of work to do, man. We gotta, for one, we have to highlight those fangs. And I mean the fangs on the body, and then we'll gotta highlight the fangs on the other side. So, again, we gotta clean our mixer brush. We clean it in the dirty water. And we mix it with the flesh color that we had. So yellowish flesh color. Bone is never pure white. Bone is always kind of off-white, yellow or dirty, or, you know, it's very hard to find like pure white like your dentist want it to be. So bone normally is kind of like a dirty, fleshy color, or a dirty yellowish color. Think about the way that things really are, as opposed to what your brain wants to tell you they are. Those are two separate things. So now we, maybe that's too much paint. Hold on. Now we highlight the areas around there. What these protrusions are gonna be there you go. Okay. He's gonna mess around with it a little bit with this and putting it in different places. Just to make a little transition here. So, because I think that this should be a little bit more fleshy than it's showing, so as I paint the figure, I realize maybe I want more flesh in places. Maybe I want more maybe this stuff is fleshier than meets the eye at first, so I'm hitting the higher parts with this brush right now. And technically this is not a dry brush, but it's almost like a dry brush technique of just letting the brush use very little pressure on the brush, so it just glides over the higher places. So every time you add a layer, things acquire a little bit more detail. Okay, so now let's go to the part of the show where things got a little bit interesting. We're gonna do our first wash. The wash is what is going to create more depth in your figure. So I'm gonna leave this color alone, this thing alone. And I'm gonna add, let's see, what is this? This is technically a layer brush, but I'm just gonna use it as a wash brush. So a wash is a very thin paint. Where did it go? Here. And the wash that came with this thing is a kind of like a brownish wash, and this is extremely wet. Like this is almost like water here. What the wash does is that the wash will get into the crevices of your model and therefore seep in there and create more contrast between dark and light. So let's go ahead and start doing that on the top, since that's the part that's probably dry already. So I'm going to put wash around the crevices, and you can be generous with the wash. Just make sure that it recedes and doesn't stay on top. So the wash goes in all the edges. Just look at your edges, and that's where the wash is going to live. Now this wash is kind of brownish black. It really doesn't matter at this point. There's washes that come in different colors, or shades. They're also called shades. And they're fairly easy to apply. You just paint and let them go to the crevices. Washes are probably the simplest things to paint with, and that's why a lot of people want to paint miniatures quickly uses both a combination of washes and dry brush, because dry brushing and washing are the easiest techniques. So this will go in the background and it will give detail to what you're doing. So here is a lot of places to apply this wash. Like apply it all in the crevices. Let that wash run. It will naturally, water always finds the least path of resistance. That means it's automatically going to go into the crevices. And you see how it's adding, I mean, it's already adding layers of depth right here with the little bit that I've done. A common place to apply the wash is between the base color and the layer. In this case, I got carried away with layering, and so I applied my wash later on. I say do what looks right and what feels right for you. Different people have different orders of steps in which they do things. Okay, now I'm actually gonna put a wash in between the teeth and things. Okay, so we have a purple worm in the making. Let me see. Okay, now we need to work on some highlights. That could probably be applied as a dry brush. Let me prepare this. So we can do a little bit of white and a little bit of yellow. And even a little bit of red. Let's see what that comes up with. White, yellow, and a tad of red make kind of like a warm flesh tone. Okay, so what you do is we do the opposite of what we just did. We grab a brush that is like this. Let me see if would that focus there. I don't know if I think it's focusing on the worm. This is a dry brush. Basically, you do that. Okay, that is a lot of paint. So you grab a piece of napkin, whatever, and you dab it on there until you're getting very little samples of it. That's probably the right amount of paint now. And then you dry brush. You just do it on the, and it'll naturally go on the high parts. So this is the opposite of what we just did. Okay, so we go like this, we go like that, and then we apply this, and it'll apply on the higher surfaces. Okay, and that's dry brushing. It's a highlight technique to just get the ridges on everything. Okay, since this takes care of the flesh area. Okay, you can see where the dry brush is like hanging onto things. This is an aggressive technique, so you just like, you know, really get in there and hit it hard. Okay. And just let it rip, man. Maybe too much. You know if it's too much if the too much paint starts getting on stuff. And then you control how much of that you want. Now this works for every color and every instance that you want to highlight. Okay, you see now we put our shade and we put our highlight. So that starts creating more depth. Okay. So now what we can do is highlight our worm. So the back of the worm needs to be highlighted, whatever. Oh, wait a second. We'll do a, yeah, let's clean this brush. And we'll use some of that, some of this. Okay, let's create a vibrant, orange, not orange, purple, sorry. Okay, let's mix these two. So that's the color we kind of came up with. I'm thinking maybe it needs a little bit more white and a little bit more blue. This is for you to figure out, mix your colors, figure out what, you know, what you want. There you go, look at that. So now you have a more vibrant, it's kind of like a pastel color. Grab your dry brush, grab your worm, dip this thing in here, make sure you get rid of the excess, and go to town, man. And just go to frickin' town with this. Like, it is going to catch on all the ridges that this thing has. Especially on the borders of this thing. That should catch. You can even kind of do a little bit on both because it helps that transition. You see how it goes from the flesh to the purple, and now the flesh and the purple have like a seamless transition. Because the purple is part of the worm, because it's a purple worm. So let's do the same thing on the other side. That helps tie the figure together, really. So there you go. You just go in between. Go in between both of them. And it will help. It's like a gradient. So like a color gradient, it'll help. And this is what airbrushes achieve a little bit easier, is this kind of gradient effect where you have two colors coming together, but they mix naturally. So there you go, look at that. That looks pretty. You see that gradient? But don't stop there. Gradients are people too. Gradient the shit out of this thing, man. Like there's purple here and purple here because it's a purple worm, man. So add a little bit of purple down here. Okay. Okay. Alright. Alright. Let's do this. Always go perpendicular to your surface when you're doing this, by the way. Perpendicular is a lot more effective. So there we go, we got this stuff right here. Look at that. I'm telling you, one could paint with little else but dry brushing and washing. Okay, but there needs to be another set of highlight for the teeth, because the teeth are going to have a little bit of white in them. So how about we put some white in here. And we mix it with a nice purple. And maybe we even need more white, I don't know, but I think that's good. Because there needs to be even more highlighting in this thing. So let's highlight. And some people do this with a dry brushing, some people do this with a fine leather brush. It's easier, obviously, doing the dry brushing. But you don't have as much control, so. So if you concentrate on the tips, and this color is derived from the other colors, so if you just concentrate on the tips, it should bring a little bit of that white right there. Yeah, I know I need to use less paint. But you see how it's turning those fangs a little bit whiter? And in this case, it's probably the ideal technique because those things are very recessed and they're very hard to get to. So. So it's all about gradient of color. Okay, so you got that. Okay, and to finish up, let's put even more white, because I mean, you're getting deep into what this thing is about. Now we're getting super white. Okay. And that super white can be both applied with the dry brush and because now you can come in and you can go on the very tips of things. Just hit the very tip of anything. Okay, it's another level of details, another level of gradient. Like it goes on the very tips of the teeth, and so I'm gonna slather the teeth that are inside with this white stuff so you can see them, you can see the tips. Okay. So now you can see what's inside the mouth. There's dark and there's black because it would be black in there, but there's also sharp teeth doing sharp teeth stuff. There you go. So I think for the part of the worm, I think I'm gonna stop there for the worm itself. I don't know that I want to do much else to it. I think the grading came out okay. The little fang things came out okay. I mean, and now we can focus on the bottom, the ground that is coming out from. The wash has a red cap. I figured it out, man. It's got a red cap so I don't confuse it with the paints. Because a wash is nothing like a paint. So we're gonna take our layer brush that we were using for the wash. A lot of companies make wash brushes, but yeah. Is it really worth it? I don't know. So we're gonna do wash on the bottom. So base technically shouldn't take that long. Unless you really want it to, but it's not as much. It's kind of hard to film this base. I'm trying to give you guys an angle, but I don't know if that's working. Let me see, can you see that? I think you can. I'm trying to be better about showing you these angles. I realize I haven't made a video in a while about painting stuff, so I may be painting a lot while you guys can't see anything. And that's not cool, dude. Okay. So now we put our wash in here so it creeps in all the crevices. And there you go. That's a wash. Enjoy the buffet. We take the brown and we mix it with A little bit of yellow. I think we have done that before. We mixed it with a little bit of yellow. But this time we'll put a little bit more yellow. And a little bit of red. So now it's more in equal parts. So let's grab our mixing brush and mix this stuff up. What are we coming up with? This is a very warm brown. And maybe we don't want a brown that is this warm. Well, no, I'm not saying it's bad as a... It does have that kind of mud consistency, which is fine. So we'll use a little bit of it. Hold on. I'm getting an idea as I'm speaking here. I'm getting an idea. So we can use some of this kind of rust color that we have created and mix it with some water so it's not too harsh. And just kind of put it on top. And so it creates like a little bit of warmer. It's almost like the ground is muddy because a worm came out and it kind of mixed the mud with the regular earth. And you know, some of that clay, some of that mud, sometimes it's that reddish mud. If you ever went jogging in the desert of California, props to whoever figured out the reference to Beverly Hills Cop. You end up with red mud in your shoes, right? Or red clay. So put a little bit of this reddish clay in there. So that's already giving you a little bit more depth on the ground. I'm trying to paint the raised areas. We're leaving the crevices alone because we just put some wash in the crevices. So how's that? It looks very wet right now because it is. We're gonna go with the dry brush now. So we're gonna add some white to this. Maybe that's too much white, I don't know. We'll figure it out. So we're not going to use all the white that I put on there. I just want to make the next gradient, which is just a little bit lighter. There you go. So that's the next gradient of that same color. We have here some sand from Citadel. Oop, that's a lot of glare, sorry. So there's some sand for miniatures, and here's some, what it's called, static grass. I believe that places like hobby stores may have some of this stuff in different form, because this stuff gets expensive if all you do is buy it from Games Workshop. And then we have our PVA glue, which is a glue that you can use to PVA glue you can find anywhere. It doesn't have to be any kind of brand. Basically you will use this to put the grass and the sand and everything on there. So what we're gonna do next is we're gonna grab our dry brush and prep that. I'm gonna clean my dry brush a little bit better. I have to make sure that it doesn't have any residue from previous paint. There we go. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna stick it in here and do that. Let me see. Let's see if that creates a different enough gradient. This is dry for a little bit, so I'm gonna try and see what's going on. It's slightly better. You know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking maybe that this needs a little bit of yellow. Let me see how that... There we go. And just a dab of red doesn't hurt. There you go. And that's a lot of freaking paint. Okay. Let's put this, let it wash, and grab a little bit of this. It needs to be similar yet different enough to the background for it to highlight correctly. There we go. Okay, so now we have, with the dry brush, it's better defined now. Let me see, maybe it's a little bit fleshy. Let me add a little bit of yellow. I'm still not completely satisfied with this. Hold on. I shall not be happy until it looks right. There we go. We get more like an orangey flavor here. Okay, let's try this. There you go. We just gotta create enough layer effect. Okay, I think that's better. I'm a little bit happier with it now. It looks more earthy now, or part of what it's supposed to be. Okay. There we go. Now we have some PVA glue on the napkin. You probably can't see it because there's not enough contrast, but there's some glue right there. I will show you. I can prove it. That's glue. So we can put the glue here. And I'm not gonna cover the whole thing with glue, I'm just gonna dab it here and there. And so I'm dabbing the base or parts of the base with glue. There we go. I'm just gonna leave this here. And what you do next is interesting. So instead of grabbing stuff from here, and putting it here, you dip this inside this. Let me show you. Oh. Things never want to cooperate when I'm live, man. Ooh, okay, come on. Come on. Okay, there we go. So make sure. Okay, so you grab this, you put it in here. I'm just gonna put it in the bottom. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna shift sand around it. I'll turn it. Okay. I'll tap it. Just give it a little tappy, tap, 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 Peru. Okay. Just tap it in. Just tap it in. Okay, so you go like that. Okay. So basically what's left is what's left. I would just brush the excess off. Because in the end you don't want a figure that is shedding frickin' sand all over the place. So make sure you tap excess out of here. Okay. So this is kind of what you end up with. Is a base that has sand. Okay, along with whatever else you put on it. So now if you want to add a little bit more stuff, you can grab a little bit more glue. And in strategic places where you think it would go, like right here, like right here, let me grab more glue, like right here, like maybe right here, and maybe right there. Maybe there's just a little bit of grass that was used to be there before this worm came out and tore everything to pieces. So we do the same thing, but with the grass. So we just go like this, just get it to the bottom and just floop, floop, floop. And let's get rid of the excess stuff. And you see how it's funny that the grass sticks to the places that had the glue, right? So now you're seeing that the base is not as bad to do as you would think. Why is it focusing on the background? So now you have some grass in the base, you have some sand, and you have the worm.